She is hiding someone in the basement. The whisper barely existed, yet it cut through the stillness of the hallway like a blade of glass. Nathan Pierce stopped breathing. The mansion was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock and the soft hum of the heater. The little black girl stood beside him, her small hand pointing toward the dark wooden door at the end of the corridor. The brass lock shimmered faintly under the dim light. Nathan crouched to her level. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice barely above a breath. The girl did not flinch. Her eyes were wide, calm, almost older than her years. "Someone is down there," she said softly. "She feeds them when you are asleep." Before Nathan could reply, a voice echoed behind them. "What are you doing up at this hour?" It was Elise, his fiancée, standing in the doorway, her robe tied perfectly, her face framed by the glow from her bedroom. Her tone was light, but her fingers gripped the doorframe too tightly. Nathan turned his head slowly. "She said someone is in the basement," he said. "Is that true?" Elise's laugh came out too quickly. "That is nonsense. The child must have had a nightmare." She stepped forward, her slippers soundless on the floor. "There is nothing down there but paint cans and old furniture. Come, Nathan. She needs to sleep." The girl shook her head. "No," she whispered again. "Someone cried. Last night. And before that, too." Her voice trembled on the last word, but her eyes did not. The hallway light flickered once, as if the house itself was listening. Nathan's chest tightened. The child's certainty made his skin crawl. He walked toward the basement door. The air grew colder with every step. When his hand touched the knob, he realized the lock was turned from the outside. New metal, smooth and polished. He pulled, but it did not move. "Where is the key?" he asked. Elise hesitated, then smiled. "In the study, I suppose. But really, this is absurd. Please, come back." Nathan looked at her, then at the girl. "Go back to your room," he told the child quietly. "It is late." But the girl did not move. She only whispered once more, barely audible. "Please, believe me." Nathan stood still, the whisper echoing through his chest long after the hallway went silent. The light flickered again, catching on the brass lock. It gleamed faintly, as if hiding the truth behind it. The next morning began with a silence that did not feel like peace. It was the kind of silence that hummed under the surface, heavy and expectant. The grand house that once sounded alive with staff footsteps and the faint smell of coffee now carried an invisible tension. Nathan Pierce stood by the kitchen window, his eyes fixed on the garden outside but his mind still trapped in the hallway from last night. The little girl's voice kept replaying inside his head like a whisper that refused to fade. "She is hiding someone in the basement." He had slept for only an hour, maybe less. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that locked door and the way Elise's fingers had tightened around her robe. The more he tried to reason with himself, the less it made sense. He had known Elise for 2 years. She was graceful, intelligent, and endlessly composed. Yet there had been something last night that his instincts could not ignore. The sound of soft footsteps broke his thoughts. The little girl entered the kitchen, her backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. Her hair was tied in 2 uneven braids. She climbed onto a stool, silent, her small hands folded around a mug of milk that one of the housekeepers had placed in front of her. Nathan watched her for a long moment before speaking. "Did you sleep well, Ava?" His tone was gentle, but even he could hear the strain in it. Ava looked up, her eyes still shadowed. "I heard it again," she said quietly. A thump, like someone moved. Nathan's throat tightened. He leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure it was not just the heater or the pipes?" Ava shook her head. "It came from under the floor." Elise entered the kitchen just then, her perfume cutting through the air. She smiled in that careful, perfect way that made Nathan's stomach twist. "Good morning," she said brightly. "You both look like you have seen ghosts." Nathan turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Ava said she heard something again last night." Elise laughed, a sound just a little too loud for the quiet room. "Children hear everything when they cannot sleep," she said. "Dreams, noises, shadows. This house is big. It creaks. You know that." Ava lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening around her mug. Elise walked closer and brushed the girl's hair with the back of her hand. "You have such an imagination," she said softly, though her eyes were cold. Maybe we should limit bedtime stories. Nathan noticed the girl flinch ever so slightly at the touch. Something in him hardened. Elise, he said, his voice even, you locked the basement again last night. She turned, her smile frozen. Of course, you know how I hate rodents. The pest control team left traps there last week. You should not open it without gloves. The excuse came too easily. Nathan said nothing. He finished his coffee and set the cup down slowly. I will check it later, he said, just to be sure. Elise's tone changed. Nathan, you are being paranoid. Her voice was sweet but edged with impatience. You are letting a child's nightmare turn into suspicion. Do you really think I would hide something from you? Nathan met her kaza. I do not know what to think, he said. That is what worries me. For a long second, no one spoke. The housekeeper re-entered quietly, sensing the tension, and began to clear the dishes. Elise smoothed her robe, exhaled, and said, I'm going to the spa. Maybe when I return, everyone will have their heads clear again. She bent to press a kiss against Nathan's cheek, but he turned slightly, pretending not to notice. When she left, the air shifted again. Ava stared after her until the sound of the front door faded. Then she whispered, You do not believe me, do you? Nathan sat beside her, his voice low. I believe that you heard something, but I need to understand what it was before we do anything. Ava nodded, though her face showed disappointment. Grown-ups never believe things until it is too late, she said. Her words landed deeper than she intended. Nathan remembered the headlines from a month ago: missing woman, presumed dead, last seen near the Northern District. He remembered the face on the television screen, the one that had made him pause for reasons he could not explain. There was a strange resemblance between that woman and Elise, something about the eyes. He had brushed it off as coincidence then. Now, the thought made his stomach turn. Later that afternoon, Nathan found himself walking toward the basement door again. The hallway was quiet, except for the faint hum of electricity. Sunlight slanted through the window, catching the dust in the air. The brass lock gleamed. He reached for it, fingers tracing the edges. New metal, sharp corners, recently installed. He crouched, noticing a faint line of dust along the floorboards near the threshold. It was disturbed, as though someone had walked there recently. When he leaned closer, a faint sound reached his ears, a shuffle, soft and uneven, followed by silence. Nathan straightened abruptly, his pulse racing. He turned, expecting to see someone behind him, but the hallway was empty. Only the portrait of his late father stared down at him, the eyes painted too sharply, as if judging. He walked back to his office and searched the drawers for the spare house keys. They were all neatly arranged, each labeled. Except one was missing the small brass key marked B. Nathan's hands tightened into fists. He exhaled slowly, forcing his breath to steady. For the first time, the house felt unfamiliar. It was no longer his sanctuary of success, but a labyrinth of secrets. As evening fell, the sky turned amber outside the tall windows. Ava sat on the couch in the living room, drawing on a piece of paper. Nathan approached quietly. She looked up at him and smiled faintly. I drew the door, she said, so you will not forget. He looked down. The drawing was simple but haunting: a hallway, a single door, and a pair of eyes drawn behind it in gray pencil. Nathan's voice dropped to a whisper. I will not forget. The drawing trembled slightly in his hand as the wind brushed through the open window. Somewhere deep below the floor, the house made a sound again, faint, like someone moving in the dark. That night, the house seemed to hold its breath. Every hallway light glowed softer than usual, and even the grandfather clock in the living room ticked slower, as if afraid to interrupt the quiet. Nathan Pierce sat in his study, the glow from his desk lamp spilling across papers he could not read. His mind had circled the same thought for hours. The missing key, the whisper, the sound beneath the floor. He opened his laptop, trying to drown the unease in work, but his attention kept drifting toward the security monitors lined on the wall. One of the cameras showed the basement door at the end of the hallway, still, motionless, almost daring him to come closer. Ava had gone to bed early, her drawing of the door tucked beside her pillow. Before she fell asleep, she had whispered to him, You will look tonight, right? Her small voice had carried both trust and fear. Nathan had promised, Though his chest tightened with doubt, the night deepened. The digital clock on his desk turned from 11 to midnight. Outside, wind brushed through the trees, carrying dry leaves across the stone path. Nathan stood up, the leather chair creaking softly behind him. He took the flashlight from the drawer and stepped into the hallway. Each footstep echoed faintly on the wooden floor. He moved carefully, passing the family portraits and the tall mirror that reflected his uneasy expression. When he reached the basement door, the air felt cooler. The brass lock glimmered under the dim light. He reached for it, but something stopped him. A faint sound. It was not the hum of electricity or the creak of wood. It was different, something human. A muffled thump, followed by what sounded like a breath, short and strained. Nathan's stomach twisted. He pressed his ear against the door. Another sound came, softer this time, like a whisper he could not make out. He stepped back, gripping the flashlight tighter. His heart pounded so loudly it nearly drowned the silence. "Hello?" he called, his voice barely steady. No answer. Only another faint rustle, then quiet. He walked to the end of the hall, opened the small cabinet where spare batteries were kept, and noticed a folded piece of paper taped inside. His name was written across it in delicate handwriting. He pulled it free, unfolding it with careful hands. Inside, there was a short message written in Elise's handwriting. "Do not go down there tonight. It is being handled." Nathan froze. His pulse quickened. He looked toward the basement door again. The paper shook between his fingers. The words, "being handled," looped through his mind until they lost meaning. What could possibly need to be handled behind a locked door? He turned on the flashlight and pointed it at the doorknob. The lock was indeed new, polished metal. Near the bottom edge of the door, he noticed faint scuff marks as if someone had tried to push it from the inside. He crouched, heart hammering, and whispered, "Who is there?" The silence that followed was heavy, stretching like an unanswered prayer. Then, faintly, came a single sound. A tap. One, then another. A pause. Two more. It was not random. It was deliberate. Nathan stood abruptly, every hair on his neck rising. He looked down the hall toward Ava's room. The door was closed, light spilling softly from beneath it. She was safe. He turned back to the basement and placed his hand flat against the wood. It was cold, colder than it should have been. He whispered to himself, "I need proof." Returning to his study, Nathan retrieved a small black camera from his desk drawer, a discreet motion detector he used for security checks at his construction sites. He adjusted the settings, then walked back down the hall and set it on the shelf opposite the basement door, aimed directly at the lock. The tiny red light blinked once, then turned steady. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen, warm and ordinary. Elise poured coffee at the counter, her robe perfectly pressed, her smile as bright as the china cups. "You were up late again," she said lightly. "Could not sleep?" Nathan nodded, studying her face. "No, the wind was loud." She tilted her head, her eyes soft but distant. "You should take your sleeping pills again. They help when your mind refuses to stop." Ava entered then, carrying her drawing. She placed it on the table, her small hand smoothing the paper. "I made it bigger," she said. "I added the eyes. There are 2 people behind the door now." Elise's smile froze. "Sweetheart, maybe you should draw something happy," she said, "like flowers or the garden." Ava looked up at her, expression calm but unblinking. "I draw what is real." Nathan watched the exchange in silence. Elise set her cup down with a soft click. "I will be in the garden," she said, turning away quickly. Her perfume lingered after she left. Later that day, when the house grew quiet again, Nathan retrieved the camera from the hallway. His hands were slightly unsteady as he connected it to his laptop. The footage began still images of the hallway through the night, the clock on the wall ticking through the hours. Then, at 3 minutes past 2, movement. The video showed Elise walking down the hallway. She was barefoot, wearing a long white robe. In her hands, she carried a tray. She paused at the basement door, looked around, then unlocked it with a small key. The door opened just enough for her to slip inside. The light from her flashlight flickered, catching her face before she disappeared into the darkness. Nathan's hand tightened on the mouse. A few seconds later, the door opened again. Elise stepped out, now without the tray. Her expression was blank, her movements precise. She locked the door once more and walked back toward the camera. Just before she vanished from frame, her head turned slightly as if she sensed she was being watched. Nathan paused the video. His reflection stared back at him from the laptop screen, pale and disbelieving. He could feel the thud of his heartbeat in his throat. The girl had been right all along. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. The truth was no longer hiding. It was waiting to be faced. Nathan did not remember how long he sat there staring at the frozen image on the screen. The sight of Elise slipping through the basement door replayed again and again in his mind until it became almost unreal. The room around him seemed to shrink. He heard the faint tick of the clock, the distant hum of the heater, and the sound of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. The truth was no longer a theory. It was now something recorded, visible, undeniable. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Every part of his mind screamed for logic, for a reasonable explanation, but no logic could explain what he had just seen. Elise had gone into the basement in the middle of the night. She had carried food. She had returned without it, and she had locked the door again. Nathan closed the laptop and rubbed his temples. His thoughts circled back to the child. Ava had seen something. She had tried to warn him. He had brushed her off, and now he felt the weight of that mistake pressing down on his chest. A knock on the door startled him. He turned quickly. Ava stood at the threshold, still in her pajamas, her small face pale. "You saw it, did you not?" she asked. Nathan's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "The woman," Ava said quietly. "She goes there when it is dark. I told you." He nodded slowly. "You were right." Ava stepped inside, holding something wrapped in tissue paper. "I found this in the laundry room," she said. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small silver bracelet, tarnished but engraved with a name, Clara. Nathan frowned. The name was familiar. He had heard it before. Then it struck him. Clara Ross, the woman whose disappearance had filled every news station a month ago. "Where did you find this?" he asked, voice low. Ava looked at him, hesitant. "It fell out of the woman's pocket when she washed clothes yesterday. I picked it up before she saw." Nathan's chest felt heavy. The pieces were falling into place, one by one, forming a picture he did not want to see. He took the bracelet and placed it gently on his desk. "You did the right thing, Ava," he said. She nodded but did not smile. "What are you going to do?" He hesitated. He had power, wealth, influence, but right now those things meant nothing. "I need to know the truth," he said finally. "Completely." Ava's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you will have to go down there." The words hung in the air. Nathan looked at her, realizing that she understood more than any child should. That evening, Elise returned from her errands with her usual calm. She set her handbag on the counter and greeted Nathan with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. "You look pale," she said. "Long day?" Nathan studied her carefully. "You could say that," he replied. They ate dinner together in silence. Ava picked at her food while Elise spoke about the upcoming charity event, her tone practiced and smooth. Nathan responded when necessary, but his mind was far away. The silver bracelet rested in his pocket, its weight a reminder of what he had seen. When dinner ended, Elise rose from the table and began clearing dishes. Nathan followed her into the kitchen. "Elise," he said, keeping his tone even. "Who is Clara Ross?" Her hand froze mid-motion. A single plate slipped from her fingers and landed in the sink with a dull clang. For a second, her expression was blank. Then she smiled faintly. "I do not know anyone by that name. Why?" Nathan reached into his pocket and placed the bracelet on the counter. The engraving caught the light. Elise stared at it for a moment too long. Then she forced another smile. "That is not mine." Ava had followed them quietly. She stood near the doorway, watching. "Yes, it is," she said softly. "You had it yesterday." Elise turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "You should be in bed," she said, her tone sharp enough to slice through the air. Nathan stepped between them. "Enough," he said. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "Do not speak to her like that." Elise's lips parted in surprise. "Nathan, you are letting her fill your head with stories." He met her gaze steadily. "I saw the footage, Elise." Her smile faltered completely. For the first time since he had known her, she looked afraid. "What footage?" "You know what I mean," he said. "You were in the hallway last night. You unlocked the basement and took a tray inside. I need you to tell me who is down there." The silence that followed was heavy. Elise's eyes darted toward Ava, then back to Nathan. "You are mistaken," she said, voice trembling slightly now. "I was sleepwalking. You know I have done that before." Nathan shook his head slowly. "You were not asleep." Elise took a step closer, her tone shifting from fear to pleading. "Nathan, listen to me. You do not understand what you are doing. Please, let this go." Ava's small hand reached for Nathan's sleeve. "She is lying," she whispered. Nathan looked down at the child, then back at Elise. The air between them felt charged, fragile. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I am opening that door." Elise's breath caught. "If you do that, you will regret it," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Nathan did not answer. He turned away, guiding Ava gently toward the staircase. "Go to your room," he said to her. "Lock the door and stay there." As they climbed the stairs, Ava looked back over her shoulder. Elise still stood in the kitchen, her figure framed by the golden light. Her face was unreadable, but her hand had closed tightly around the silver bracelet. Upstairs, Nathan waited until Ava was safely in her room. Then he went to his study, locked the door behind him, and sat in silence. The bracelet lay on his desk, gleaming faintly under the lamp. Beneath it, a single thought pulsed in his mind. Whatever was in that basement, it was not just a secret. It was a truth waiting to destroy everything. Nathan woke before sunrise. The air in the house felt heavier than usual, as if it carried the weight of what was about to happen. The decision he had made the night before settled inside him like a stone. Today, he would open the basement. No more whispers, no more questions. The truth would no longer hide behind a locked door. He dressed quietly, pulling on a plain shirt and dark trousers. Downstairs, the house was still. The first light of morning filtered through the tall windows, casting pale gold across the marble floor. The scent of coffee lingered faintly from the night before, mixed with something else metallic and cold, like dust disturbed after too long. Ava was already awake. She sat on the bottom stair, hugging her knees, her eyes fixed on the hallway. "You are really going to do it," she said softly. Nathan nodded. "I have to." The girl hesitated, then held out her small hand. In her palm was a tiny object wrapped in paper. "I found this in the corner of the kitchen," she whispered. Nathan unwrapped it. Inside was a small brass key. His stomach tightened. "Where did you find it?" Ava pointed toward the sink. "It fell when she dropped the plate last night. I heard it hit the floor." Nathan stared at the key. It was old but sturdy, its surface smooth from years of use. His heart thudded in his chest. "Ava," he said quietly, "I need you to stay in your room today. No matter what happens, you lock the door and wait for me. Do you understand?" The girl's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I understand, but you will not go alone, right?" He forced a small smile. "I will be fine." When she disappeared upstairs, Nathan turned toward the basement door. Sunlight touched the brass lock, making it glint like a warning. He held the key in his palm, feeling its cold edge press into his skin. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The hinges creaked as the door opened. A draft of cold air rushed out, carrying the faint scent of damp concrete and something else he could not place. The staircase descended into darkness. He flicked on the flashlight and began to walk down. Each step groaned beneath his weight. Dust floated through the beam of light, swirling in the air like ash. The deeper he went, the colder it became. His breath came out in pale clouds. At the bottom of the stairs, the narrow hallway stretched before him. Shelves lined the walls, filled with paint cans and boxes marked with faded labels. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. He took another step, his shoes brushing across the floor. Then he saw it. A tray sat near the far wall. The plate on it was empty, except for a spoon and a cup of water, half full. The sight made his pulse quicken. Someone had eaten here recently. He turned slowly, sweeping the flashlight around the room. Near the far corner stood a large wooden cabinet, its doors slightly ajar. Nathan approached cautiously. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and pulled the door open. Inside were blankets, folded neatly, and a few books stacked on the bottom shelf. His light flickered across the title's old novels, worn at the edges. Then something behind the cabinet caught his eye. The wall was different there, newer than the rest, a patch of plaster that did not match. He knelt, running his hand along the surface. The plaster sounded hollow. He pressed gently, and a thin crack appeared where two panels met. The wall shifted slightly, revealing a hidden door made of reinforced wood. A metal latch kept it closed. His breath caught. He leaned closer and whispered, "Is anyone there?" At first, there was nothing. Then came a faint sound, a weak, trembling voice. "Help me." Nathan froze. The voice was soft, almost a sigh, but it was real. It came from behind the wall. He swallowed hard, every muscle in his body tensed. "Who are you?" he asked. The answer came slowly, each word strained. "My name is Clara." The name hit him like a blow. The missing woman, the one whose bracelet still lay on his desk upstairs. He gripped the latch, trying to lift it, but it would not move. "Clara, can you hear me? I'm going to get you out." Her reply was barely audible. "Please, hurry." He stood, his mind racing. The door was reinforced from the outside. It needed tools to break open. He turned to go back upstairs, but a shadow blocked the light at the top of the stairs. Elise stood there, her hand resting casually on the railing. "You should not be down there," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were cold. "It is dangerous." Nathan's grip tightened on the flashlight. "There is someone locked inside, Elise." She smiled faintly. "You always jump to conclusions. You have no idea what you are doing." "I heard her," he said sharply. "I spoke to her. Her name is Clara Ross." For a moment, something flickered in Elise's expression, fear, then fury. "You do not understand," she said. "She ruined everything. I had to keep her quiet." Nathan took a step forward. "You kidnapped her." Elise shook her head slowly. "I saved her from herself. She was not supposed to be here anymore. She was going to destroy you, Nathan." He stared at her, disbelief and anger warring inside him. "You are lying." Elise's voice hardened. "If you open that door, you will destroy both of us. Leave it closed." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I will not." He moved toward the stairs, but Elise blocked his path. "You think you can handle the truth," she said, her tone low and sharp. "But once you open that door, there is no going back." Nathan's voice was steady now. "There never was any going back." He brushed past her and climbed the stairs. Her voice followed him, soft but filled with venom. "You have no idea what you are unleashing." When he reached the top, he locked the basement door from the inside. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. Somewhere beneath his house, a woman waited in darkness. Somewhere above, a child had seen everything before he did. The truth was now alive, breathing through the cracks of every wall. The following morning arrived gray and silent. The sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen windows, washing the marble floor in a pale glow. Nathan Pierce sat at the dining table, his coffee untouched, his mind still trapped in the darkness below the house. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that voice again, faint and pleading from behind the wall. "Help me." Upstairs, Ava's footsteps moved lightly across the floor. The child was awake early, as if she too had felt the unease in the air. When she appeared in the doorway, clutching her small drawing pad, Nathan managed a tired smile. "Good morning, Ava." She looked at him carefully. "You found her, did you not?" He nodded. "I found where she is, yes. But I could not get her out." Ava pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "The woman is angry," she said softly. "She was walking in the hallway again last night." Nathan's stomach tightened. "Did she see you?" Ava shook her head. "No. I hid behind the curtain, but she was talking to herself. She said something about sending me away." Nathan reached across the table, placing a steady hand over hers. "She will not do that," he said. "You are safe here, I promise." But even as he said the words, doubt stirred inside him. Elise had grown unpredictable. He could not guess what she might do next. Elise entered the room a few minutes later, her face perfectly composed, her movements calm. "You are up early," she said cheerfully. pouring herself a cup of coffee. I was hoping to sleep in after such a long night. Nathan studied her. Yes, it was a long night indeed. She looked at him, then at Ava, her smile tightening. You two seem to have secret meetings lately. Should I be jealous? Ava did not answer. She slid off the chair quietly and retreated toward the stairs. Elise's gaze followed her until she disappeared. Then she turned back to Nathan. You locked the basement again, she said. The night returned with a chill that crept through the walls of the mansion. Nathan Pierce sat in his study, staring at the silent screen of his laptop. The evidence was already there, the footage, the bracelet, the voice behind the wall, but every part of him struggled to comprehend it. He had spent his life solving problems with numbers, contracts, and deals. Yet no amount of logic could solve what hid in his own house. The clock struck midnight. Nathan rose from his chair and walked to the window. Outside, the gardens were drenched in silver light. The trees barely moved. The stillness was unnatural, almost warning. He turned when he heard the faint creak of a floorboard. Ava stood by the doorway, her small frame wrapped in a blanket. You should be asleep, Nathan said softly. Ava shook her head. I heard her again, she whispered. The woman downstairs. She called your name this time. Nathan's heart skipped. You heard my name? Yes, Ava said. She said, Nathan, help me. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to steady his breathing. Ava, he said gently, I'm going to take care of it, but I need you to stay far from that door. The girl hesitated, then walked closer. Her eyes were wide but steady. She knows you are listening, she said quietly. She said the other woman knows you found out. You are not safe now. Nathan froze. The weight of those words settled deep in his chest. Elise had been unusually quiet all evening. After dinner, she had gone to her room and closed the door without a word. He had not seen her since. He crouched, so his eyes met Ava's. Listen to me, he said. You stay in my office tonight. Lock the door and keep the light on. Do not open it for anyone but me. Ava nodded, her expression grave. What are you going to do? I am going to find out what she knows, Nathan replied. He watched the girl walk into the office, then turned toward the hallway. The mansion was darker than usual. Even the lights seemed dimmer, flickering with every step he took. When he reached the basement door, he saw something that made his stomach twist. The key was gone. The lock was unlatched. Someone had already opened it. Nathan reached for the doorknob and pushed it gently. The hinges moaned as the door swung inward. A faint light glowed from below, like a candle burning far away. He descended the steps slowly, flashlight in hand, each step creaking under his weight. The air was colder than before. At the bottom, he stopped. The hidden wall had been disturbed. The plaster was cracked, and the secret door behind it now stood open. A faint voice came from the darkness beyond. Nathan? He stepped forward, shining the light. The beam landed on a pale face, tired, fragile, but alive. Clara Ross blinked at the brightness, shielding her eyes. Her wrists were bound loosely with fabric, not rope. Her voice shook. She went upstairs. She said she had to make sure you would not ruin everything. Nathan's chest tightened. You are safe now, he said, crouching to untie her hands. We are leaving, right now. Clara caught his wrist. You do not understand, she whispered. She is not going to let us leave. She has been watching you, all of us. There are cameras you do not know about. She told me everything. Nathan's pulse raced. Cameras? She said she wanted to prove she could control you, Clara said weakly. That she could build the perfect story about the perfect man and his perfect home. I was just part of it. He helped her stand. Her legs trembled but held. We are going upstairs, he said firmly. They climbed the stairs together, the beam of light shaking slightly with each step. When they reached the top, the hallway was empty, silent except for the faint hum of electricity. Nathan guided Clara toward the living room, but when they reached it, he stopped cold. Elise stood by the fireplace. Her white robe shimmered under the light of the flames. In her hands, she held a small remote control. You found her, Elise said softly, almost admiringly. I wondered how long it would take. Nathan stepped between her and Clara. It is over, he said. You need help, Elise. Let us walk out of here." She laughed a quiet, broken sound. "Help. You think this is madness?" Her eyes gleamed. "I built everything we have. Every deal, every image, every word the world believes about you." And she tried to take it away. Nathan's voice remained calm. "Clara is not your enemy." "She was," Elise said. "She wanted to expose me. She wanted to ruin everything before it was perfect." "You locked her in a basement," Nathan said sharply. "That is not perfection. That is cruelty." For a moment, Elise's expression softened. Then her eyes shifted past him, toward the staircase. "Where is the child?" she asked. Nathan's stomach dropped. "She is safe." Elise's tone changed, slow and dangerous. "You think you can protect her? You cannot even protect yourself." The sound of movement came from the hallway, soft, quick footsteps. Ava appeared, her small frame outlined by the light from the study. She held something in her hands, the silver bracelet. "It belongs to her," Ava said, stepping forward. "You cannot keep it." Elise's face twisted, her calm cracking into something raw. "Put it down," she hissed. Ava shook her head. "You lied to everyone." For a long second, no one moved. Then Nathan stepped closer to Elise. "It is finished," he said quietly. "Let us all walk away before this goes any further." Elise's hand trembled. The remote slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. The sound broke the spell. Nathan reached for her arm, but she pulled away and sank into the chair near the fire, her expression empty. Clara took a slow step forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You do not have to keep lying," she said. "It is already over." Elise looked up at her, tears forming in her eyes. "He was supposed to love me," she whispered. Nathan said nothing. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. Ava looked at Nathan and whispered, "You called them, did you not?" He nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is time for the truth to come out." The little girl took his hand, her grip small but steady. "Then it is almost over," she said. Nathan looked down at her and finally allowed himself to believe she was right. The truth had been buried, but it had found its way to the surface through the courage of a child and the whisper that started it all. The wail of sirens grew louder as red and blue lights flickered against the wide windows of the mansion. The echo rolled through the empty rooms, bouncing off marble and glass. Nathan Pierce stood in the center of the living room, his heart heavy and his mind racing. The police would be there within minutes, but every second felt endless. Ava stood beside him, clutching his sleeve, her eyes wide, yet calm, as though she had already seen the truth long before any adult had dared to look. Elise sat motionless near the fireplace. The flames cast uneven shadows across her face, softening and distorting her features in turns. Her hands rested limply on her knees, her robe wrinkled, her composure finally broken. Clara Ross stood across from her, pale but steady, her voice quiet. "They are coming, Elise. You can stop pretending now." Elise's gaze drifted toward Clara, her expression unreadable. "You do not understand," she said softly. "You were never supposed to be here tonight. None of this was supposed to happen." Nathan's voice was low, controlled. "What was supposed to happen, Elise? You locking a woman in a basement until she disappeared completely?" Elise looked at him then, and for the first time, her eyes were not filled with anger but exhaustion. "I tried to protect what we built," she said. "You were the perfect man with the perfect story, and she tried to destroy it. She wanted to take your name, your empire, everything you had. I only wanted to keep you safe." "By hurting her?" Nathan asked. "By lying to everyone around you?" Elise's lips trembled, but she said nothing. The front gates creaked open outside. The sound of car doors followed several of them. The flashing lights grew stronger, painting streaks of color across the walls. Nathan took a deep breath and looked toward Clara. "You need medical attention," he said. "Stay close to me." Clara nodded, though her gaze stayed on Elise. "Do not make this harder than it already is," she said quietly. Elise turned her head toward the window, where the reflection of the flashing lights shimmered. "Do you know what it is like," she whispered, "to build something beautiful and watch someone else claim it? To spend years creating perfection and then see it crumble because someone else dared to exist?" Nathan shook his head slowly. "That is not love, Elise. That is control." The doorbell rang. The sharp sound startled Ava, who tightened her grip on Nathan's hand. He squeezed her fingers gently. "It is all right," he murmured. "They are here to help." He opened the door. 2 uniformed officers entered first, their flashlights sweeping the hallway, followed by a detective in a dark coat. The man introduced himself as Detective Howard and nodded toward Nathan. "We received a call about a missing person possibly being held here," he said. "Is everyone safe at the moment?" Nathan gestured toward Clara. "This is Clara Ross," he said. "She has been held in the basement. She needs immediate care." The detective's face tightened, and he motioned to the officers. "Call for a medical unit." Then he turned to Nathan again. "Who is responsible?" Nathan looked toward Elise. "She is." Elise did not move. Her eyes followed the flicker of the flames. When the officers approached her, she lifted her head and spoke in a voice that was almost tender. "You think you are saving him," she said to Nathan, "but he will never be the same again." Nathan did not answer. He watched as they placed the cuffs gently around her wrists. She did not resist. She stood gracefully, almost as if she had rehearsed the scene in her mind 100 times before. Ava stepped forward slightly, her small voice breaking the silence. "She hurt people," she said, but she could have stopped. Elise's eyes softened at the sound of the child's voice. For a moment, her composure wavered. "You are just like I was when I was young," she said softly. "You believe every secret deserves the light. But sometimes, the light burns." The officers led her toward the door. Her bare feet whispered across the floor as she passed Nathan. "You will see, Nathan," she said without looking back. "Truth is never gentle." The door closed behind her. The sound of footsteps faded. Nathan exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The house felt different now, emptier, lighter, but scarred. Clara sat on the couch, breathing unevenly. The paramedics entered soon after, guiding her onto a stretcher with quiet efficiency. She caught Nathan's hand before they took her outside. "You listened," she whispered. "That saved my life." He nodded, his throat tight. "You held on. That saved yourself." "Huh." When the house was quiet again, Nathan turned to Ava. She stood by the window, watching the flashing lights fade into the distance. "It is over now," he said. Ava shook her head slowly. "Not yet," she replied. "The truth does not end when people leave. It stays, even when no one talks about it." Nathan walked to her side. "You are right," he said. "But it also changes things. Sometimes, for the better." The girl looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "Will she ever come back?" "No," he said softly. "Not here, not to this house." Outside, the last patrol car pulled away, leaving behind the faint echo of gravel under its tires. The fire in the hearth had burned low, and the shadows on the walls looked gentler now. Nathan placed a hand on Ava's shoulder. "You were brave," he said. "You told the truth when no one else could. That takes courage." Ava nodded, but her eyes stayed on the door. "I just did not want anyone else to get hurt," she said. "Sometimes people hide bad things because they are afraid, but it does not stop the bad things. It only makes them darker." Nathan looked around the room, at the traces of what had happened, the broken image of the life he had built. "Maybe this is where we start over," he said quietly. Ava turned to him, her small face illuminated by the last flicker of firelight. "Then you will have to build it right this time," she said. He smiled faintly. "Yes, this time, I will." The wind shifted outside, carrying the faint scent of rain. The mansion, for the first time in weeks, felt like it could breathe again. The whisper that had started everything had turned into silence, but not the heavy kind. It was the kind that comes after truth, when even the walls seem to rest. The following morning rose gray and quiet, the kind of morning that carried both calm and sorrow in the same breath. The mansion stood still under a thin layer of fog, its tall windows reflecting a pale, colorless sky. Nathan Pierce sat in the kitchen, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. The echoes of the night before still lingered, the flashing lights, the police voices, the sound of handcuffs closing around Elise's wrists. He had not slept. The house that once felt grand now felt hollow. Every sound, the creak of the wood, the whisper of the wind through the vents, reminded him of the secrets it had held. Ava entered the room, her hair slightly messy, her small steps soft on the cold floor. She climbed onto the chair across from him and studied his face. "You did not sleep, did you?" she asked quietly. Nathan shook his head. "No. Too much noise in my mind." Ava looked down at her hands. "She is gone, right? The woman who did all that?" "Yes," he said. "She is with the police now." The child nodded slowly, as if trying to decide what to feel. "Do you think she was always bad?" Nathan hesitated. "No," he said after a moment. "I think she became someone she did not want to be. That does not make what she did right, but it means she lost herself long before any of us saw it." Ava traced the edge of her mug with a finger. "She said truth burns. Maybe she was afraid of it." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe she was." Ugh. For a while, they sat in silence. Then Nathan reached into his pocket and placed the silver bracelet on the table. It caught the weak morning light, the engraved name still visible, Clara. "This belongs to her," he said. "I will return it today." Ava's eyes softened. "She will be all right, won't she?" "She will heal," Nathan replied. "She survived worse than anyone knew, and she was brave enough to speak when it mattered." Ava smiled faintly. "Like you." He shook his head gently. "No, like you." Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. Nathan rose from his chair and walked to the window. A dark sedan parked near the steps. Detective Howard stepped out, holding a folder under his arm. His expression was serious but not unfriendly. Nathan met him at the door. "Detective," he said quietly. Howard nodded. "Mr. Pierce, I wanted to speak with you about the investigation. Miss Ross is recovering at the hospital. She gave a statement this morning. It matches everything you said." Nathan exhaled. "I am relieved to hear that." The detective studied him for a moment. "She told us something else," he continued. "She said the woman Elise claimed she was protecting you from exposure, that there were business records and documents she thought would damage your reputation. Do you know anything about that?" Nathan frowned. "No, there are no hidden records. Elise might have imagined something that did not exist." Howard nodded slowly, as if expecting that answer. "We will finish the paperwork today," he said. "After that, you should take some time away from this place. It is full of memories no one should live with." "I intend to," Nathan said quietly. When the detective left, the house fell silent again. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock. Ava appeared beside him, looking up with her serious eyes. "Are they taking everything away?" she asked. "No," he said. "Just the things that should never have been here." Ava nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe the house can breathe again." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it can." Later that afternoon, Nathan drove to the hospital with the bracelet in his coat pocket. The hallways smelled of disinfectant and flowers. Clara was sitting upright in bed, pale but alert. When she saw him, her expression softened. "You came." He handed her the bracelet. "You left this behind." She took it carefully, her eyes glistening. "I did not think I would ever see it again," she said. "Thank you." Nathan sat in the chair beside her bed. "You should not thank me. I did not believe soon enough." Clara shook her head. "You listened when it mattered. That is what counts." He looked down, his voice low. "I wish I had listened to her sooner, the child. She saw everything before I did." Clara smiled gently. "Children often see the truth first. They have not yet learned how to look away." They sat quietly for a while. The late afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, striping the room in bands of gold. When he rose to leave, Clara said softly, "You should forgive yourself, Nathan. This house of yours, it can be rebuilt, but not if you keep its ghosts." He paused, then nodded. "You are right." When he returned to the mansion, Ava was sitting on the steps outside, drawing with colored pencils. The paper showed the house again, but this time the windows were open, filled with light. "You changed the drawing," Nathan said, sitting beside her. She nodded. "It looks better now," she said. "The bad things are gone, and the light can come in." He watched her for a moment, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You really believe that? Do you not?" "Yes," she said with certainty. "Even broken houses can shine again." Nathan looked toward the front door. The house loomed behind them, silent but no longer menacing. "Then maybe it is time we start fixing it," he said. Ava looked up at him. "We?" He smiled. You helped uncover the truth. You are part of this story now." The girl grinned, small but bright. "Then I will make sure it ends well." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, the mansion seemed to exhale. The golden light stretched across the steps where they Saturday. The darkness that had once filled the walls was still there, faint and lingering, but now it was only memory. For the first time, Nathan felt that the truth had not only destroyed it, had also begun to heal. The next few days passed in a strange quiet. The mansion no longer felt heavy with secrets, yet something in its air remained unsettled, like a storm that had left before the thunder could finish. Nathan Pierce spent most of his time repairing what could be repaired: broken locks, cracked walls, shattered trust. Ava stayed close, sometimes following him silently from room to room, her small footsteps soft against the marble floor. Every morning, sunlight reached deeper into the house, yet each night brought shadows that seemed to stretch longer. Nathan tried to believe the worst was behind them, but there was a restlessness inside him, a feeling that something was still missing. On the fourth morning, the stillness broke. Nathan came down to the kitchen and found the front door ajar. The cold air moved through the hallway, making the curtains flutter. "Ava?" he called. No answer. He checked the study, the living room, and finally her room upstairs. The bed was empty, the blanket folded neatly, the small sketchbook gone. His pulse quickened. He stepped out onto the porch and looked toward the driveway. The frost-covered ground showed faint footprints, small and light, leading toward the main road. Nathan's heart pounded. He grabbed his coat and followed the trail until it disappeared near the gate. The guardhouse was empty. The security team had not returned since the police investigation. He scanned the distance. The morning mist hung low, turning the trees into dark outlines. He called her name again, louder this time. "Ava!" Only the echo answered. He drove into town, stopping by the local diner, the bookstore, even the small park she liked when they passed it once. No one had seen her. He called Detective Howard, who promised to alert nearby patrols, but his tone carried the same unease Nathan felt. The girl had vanished quietly, like a whisper that had finished its story. Hours later, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Nathan returned home. The house was too silent. Every sound seemed exaggerated: the closing door, the ticking clock, his own breath. He walked into the living room and saw something resting on the table. It was a small folded piece of paper, the kind Ava often used for her drawings. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sentence written in her uneven handwriting. "Do not be afraid of the dark anymore. The truth is safe now." Nathan sat down slowly, the words sinking deep into him. For a long time, he stared at the note, wondering what it meant. Did she leave on purpose? Was she taken somewhere safe? Or was she simply trying to say goodbye in her own quiet way? That night, Nathan could not bring himself to sleep. The mansion creaked in the wind, its emptiness echoing through every corridor. Around midnight, he heard something faint, a sound that seemed to come from the direction of the basement. His breath caught. He hesitated only a moment before taking a flashlight and walking down the hall. The door was unlocked now, left open since the police had inspected it. The cold air brushed against his skin as he descended the stairs. The basement looked different in the dark. Most of the boxes had been removed, and the wall where Clara had been held stood bare and patched. Then he saw a small drawing tacked to the wall. His hands shook as he brought the light closer. It was one of Ava's sketches, the same crooked lines, the same bold strokes. It showed a door opening, and beyond it, a bright sky filled with light. A voice behind him made him turn. It was Clara. "You heard about the girl?" He nodded. "She is gone." Clara stepped down the last few stairs, her face pale but calm. "I heard she left you a message." He handed her the note. She read it slowly, then met his eyes. "She might not be lost," she said gently. "Maybe she felt her work here was done. Children like her, they come and go when the world needs to remember something good." Nathan wanted to believe that. He wanted to think Ava had left not out of fear, but out of peace. Still, a hollow ache filled his chest. "She was just a child," he said quietly. "She should not have had to carry all that." Clara touched his shoulder. "Sometimes it takes a child to make adults see the truth." They stood in silence for a while. The beam of the flashlight flickered against the wall, glinting off the rough edges of the plaster. When Nathan turned to leave, Clara paused beside the drawing. "She made sure you would remember," she said. That night, Nathan placed Ava's note inside a glass frame on his desk. He left the light on beside it. Every time he passed, he read the words again. Do not be afraid of the dark anymore. The truth is safe now. Days turned into weeks. Clara recovered and returned to her life, but Nathan stayed in the house, restoring each room carefully. He replaced broken windows, repainted the walls, and opened the heavy curtains that had once kept the sunlight out. But the biggest change was silence, different now, lighter, no longer filled with dread. One evening, as he walked past the garden, something caught his eye near the fence. It was a small object, half buried in the dirt. He knelt and brushed away the soil. It was Ava's old drawing pencil, the one with the chipped pink eraser. He held it in his hand, and for the first time in days, he smiled. The wind moved through the trees, carrying a soft sound that almost resembled laughter, faint, distant, familiar. Nathan looked up at the sky. The clouds had parted, revealing a clear stretch of stars. He whispered softly, "You are safe now too." Inside the house, the light in his study glowed against the window. The framed note caught that light, and for a moment, the words seemed to shimmer. The truth, once hidden in darkness, had finally found its peace. The following week brought a sharp chill to the air, the kind that turned every window of the mansion foggy in the morning. Nathan Pierce stood in the study, staring at the framed note that Ava had left behind. The words had become part of his daily ritual. Each day began and ended with them. Do not be afraid of the dark anymore. The truth is safe now. But the truth, though safe, still felt heavy. He had spoken with the local authorities several times since her disappearance, but there were no new leads. Detective Howard assured him that there was no sign of abduction. The town's security footage showed no strangers coming or going. It was as if Ava had simply walked into the fog and vanished, leaving behind only her message and her light. Nathan tried to move forward. He worked with contractors to repair the basement walls, removing every trace of the hidden room. He replaced the locks and ordered new lighting for the entire house. Yet every time he descended those steps, the air still carried the memory of what had been trapped there. One evening, as he was reviewing blueprints for a renovation project, he received a call from Clara Ross. Her voice carried the calm strength of someone who had begun to heal. "Nathan," she said, "I have been thinking about that girl, the one who warned you. I cannot stop wondering where she came from." Nathan sighed quietly. "Neither can I. She appeared in my life as suddenly as she left, and yet, she changed everything." Clara hesitated for a moment. "There is something you should know," she said. "A nurse at the hospital told me that the foundation that helped me after my disappearance used to sponsor children from local shelters. They had a list of names, and one of them was Ava." Nathan straightened in his chair. "Ava?" "Yes," Clara continued. "The file said she was placed in temporary care near your neighborhood almost a year ago. She had been through a few foster homes. It is possible she was one of the children the social workers lost track of during the transfer paperwork." Nathan closed his eyes. A part of him wanted to be relieved, to have something real to hold on to, but another part of him hesitated. "So she was not a mystery," he said softly. "She was just a little girl who needed someone to listen." "She was that," Clara said gently. "But maybe she also came into your life at the exact moment you needed her." "That is not a coincidence, Nathan." After they hung up, Nathan sat in the quiet for a long while. The truth about Ava's past did not make her presence any less remarkable. It only deepened his gratitude. He thought about the way she had spoken, calm, fearless, and certain. She had not been a child searching for pity. She had been a child delivering purpose. Later that night, he walked through the garden. The autumn wind brushed through the dry leaves, making them whisper softly against the stone paths. He stopped near the fence where he had found Ava's pencil and knelt down again. The soil there looked disturbed, as if someone had dug and refilled a small patch. He brushed away the top layer carefully and uncovered a folded piece of paper wrapped in plastic. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was another drawing. This one showed a man standing by a door, sunlight streaming through it. Next to him stood a small girl, her hand pointing toward the light. Beneath the drawing, in Ava's careful handwriting, were the words, "The door was never locked for you. It was locked for her." Nathan stared at the drawing until his vision blurred. The message was simple, but profound. The darkness had not belonged to him. It had belonged to Elise, the woman consumed by her own secrets. The door Ava had helped him open was more than just wood and metal. It was the barrier between truth and blindness, between fear and freedom. He held the drawing close to his chest for a moment before taking it inside. He placed it beside the framed note on his desk. The two messages, together, felt like a conversation between courage and peace. As the night deepened, Nathan poured himself a cup of tea and sat near the fireplace. The crackle of burning wood filled the silence. He could almost hear Ava's voice again, soft but steady, reminding him to listen, to believe, to see what others ignored. The firelight reflected off the glass frame, illuminating the words once more. "Do not be afraid of the dark anymore," he whispered softly. "I am not." The following morning, Nathan drove to the children's foundation Clara had mentioned. The small office smelled of paper and lemon polish. A kind woman behind the desk looked through several folders before handing him one labeled Ava Turner. He opened it carefully. Inside were brief notes, school grades, health reports, and one photograph. It was a candid picture of Ava, smiling shyly, holding a small stuffed bear. On the back of the photo was a date from nearly a year ago, and a line written in marker. "She believes that truth can fix anything." Nathan's throat tightened. He thanked the woman and stepped outside. The wind carried the scent of rain, the same scent that had filled the mansion on the night everything changed. Driving home, he kept the photograph on the passenger seat. Every glance at it made him think of her voice, her bravery, and the way she had stood between fear and truth without hesitation. When he reached the house, he placed the photograph next to her note and drawing. 3 small pieces of her now rested together, shining softly in the morning light. Nathan stood there, his hand resting on the desk, and for the first time, he felt something more than grief. It was understanding. Ava had never truly disappeared. Her courage had become part of the house, part of him, part of every corner that light now touched. The truth, once whispered by a child, now lived like sunlight, quiet, constant, and unafraid. The first snow of the season arrived quietly, settling over the trees and the long driveway like a soft white memory. Nathan Pierce stood by the window of his study, watching the flakes drift through the air. The fire behind him burned low, its light catching on the 3 framed pieces resting on his desk: Ava's note, her drawing, and her photograph. They had become the heart of the house, silent but alive. It had been 2 weeks since Nathan discovered Ava's file, 2 weeks of steady reflection and slow healing. The mansion no longer felt haunted, yet it still carried a hush that reminded him of her. Sometimes, in the early morning, he imagined hearing her footsteps or her voice calling from another room. But when he turned, it was only the sound of wind moving through the halls. That afternoon, he received a call from Detective Howard. The officer's tone was warm, less formal than before. "Mr. Pierce," he said, "I thought you should know that the case against Elise Turner has closed. She pled guilty to unlawful confinement and identity fraud. She will be serving her sentence. The media will not be allowed to contact you or Miss Ross. It is over now." Nathan listened in silence. The words "it is over" felt strange. They were heavy and light at the same time. "Thank you, Detective," he said, "for everything." After the call ended, he stood for a long time in the quiet. The truth had done its work. It had exposed, it had destroyed, and now it had cleansed. But the aftermath of truth was always stillness. It left space for something new, something honest to begin. He decided to visit Clara Ross that evening. The hospital had discharged her a few days earlier, and she was staying temporarily in a small cottage on the edge of town. When Nathan arrived, Clara greeted him at the door, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her color had returned, though her eyes still carried a shadow of the weeks she had lost. "I brought something for you," Nathan said, handing her a small box. Inside was the silver bracelet, polished and restored. Clara smiled faintly as she fastened it around her wrist. "It feels like it belongs again," she said. "Thank you." They sat by the fire, 2 survivors of the same storm. The conversation came easily now, lighter than before. Clara told him she planned to travel once she regained her strength. "Maybe I will visit the coast," she said. "See the ocean again. After all that darkness, I think I need to see something endless." Nathan nodded. "You should. The world will look different now. Everything does once the truth has been spoken." Clara studied him for a moment. And you? What will you do with the house? He hesitated, then smiled softly. I have been thinking about turning it into something new. Maybe a place where children can come when they have nowhere else to go. A home that does not hide secrets but gives safety. Clara's eyes brightened. That sounds exactly like something she would have wanted. The words settled between them. Both knew who she meant. Ava, the small girl who had seen what no one else dared to see. When Nathan drove back home that night, the snow had thickened. The headlights of his car cut through the white haze, and the world outside looked clean and untouched. As he approached the gates, something caught his attention, a faint glow near the fence where Ava's pencil had once been found. He stopped the car, stepped into the cold, and followed the light. It was a lantern, small and old-fashioned, its flame protected by glass. Someone had hung it on the post. Inside, a folded note rested against the glass. Nathan opened it carefully, shielding it from the wind. The handwriting was the same, uneven, deliberate, unmistakable. Do not close the door. Someone else might need the light. Nathan stood there for a long time, the snow gathering on his coat. The lantern flickered, its small flame refusing to die even as the wind pressed against it. He took the note and held it to his chest, his breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. When he returned inside, he placed the lantern on the mantel above the fireplace. Its warm glow filled the room, joining the soft light of the fire. The house no longer felt empty. It felt alive again, filled with quiet courage. Later that night, Nathan sat at his desk, writing in a notebook he had kept since everything began. He wrote about truth, about forgiveness, and about the courage it took to speak when silence was safer. His words flowed easily, as if guided by a whisper. He wrote, "There are voices that come to us only once. They arrive to remind us that kindness is not weakness, and that truth, no matter how painful, frees more than it breaks. If a small voice tells you to look closer, listen. It may be the one that saves you." When he finished, he placed the pen down and looked toward the window. The snowfall had stopped. The moonlight stretched across the floor in silver lines. The framed photograph of Ava seemed to glow faintly in the reflection. Her smile gentle, knowing reminded him of all that had changed. Nathan whispered softly into the stillness, "The door will stay open." And for the first time, he meant it not as a promise of fear, but of faith. The mansion, once a prison of secrets, had become a place of light. And within that light lived the memory of a child whose whisper had turned the darkness into truth. Winter deepened, and the days in the mansion began to pass in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The storm that had once surrounded Nathan Pierce's life was now replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. The house no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a beginning. The lantern Ava had left still burned each evening on the mantel, its soft light a reminder that some truths must never fade. Weeks passed, and the house that had once been filled with echoes of fear now carried the sounds of restoration. Construction workers came and went, repairing the damages left behind. The old basement door was removed completely, replaced by a solid wall. Nathan supervised everything, his presence calm but deliberate. Every hammer's strike felt like a promise to rebuild something better. One afternoon, Detective Howard stopped by, his coat dusted with snow. "Mr. Pierce," he said with a small smile, "I thought I would see how things were coming along." Nathan offered him coffee and gestured to the new lights in the hallway. "It is finally starting to feel like a home again," he said. The detective nodded, looking around with approval. "I have seen many houses after bad things happen. Most people choose to sell or tear them down. You are one of the few who stayed." Nathan smiled faintly. "If I had walked away, I would have carried the darkness somewhere else. This was the place where the truth came out. It deserves light now." "Huh." Howard studied him for a moment before saying, "You know, we found something in the evidence files. It might belong to the girl, Ava." He reached into his coat pocket and handed Nathan a small envelope. Inside was a folded photograph. It showed a younger Ava, standing with a group of children at a local shelter, her smile bright and unguarded. On the back of the photograph, written in a child's handwriting, were the words, "When you cannot find the light, be the one to bring it." Nathan's throat tightened. He traced the words with his thumb, reading them again and again. "Thank you," he said quietly. You have no idea how much this means. Howard nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. Maybe she did not vanish, Mr. Pierce. Maybe she just moved on to the next person who needed her. After the detective left, Nathan stood by the window, watching the snow swirl in gentle spirals across the garden. The words on the photograph echoed in his mind, "Be the one to bring it." It felt less like advice and more like a calling. That night, as he sat by the fireplace, Nathan began sketching plans for something new, a foundation that would provide shelter and education for children who had no one to speak for them. He decided to name it the Whisper House. The name felt right. It was quiet, like Ava's voice had been, but powerful enough to change everything around it. He reached out to Clara Ross for help. When she arrived a few days later, she brought warmth back into the mansion. Her health had returned, her smile steady and kind. "You are serious about this," she said as she looked over the papers spread across his desk. "Yes," Nathan said. "I want to turn this place into something alive again. No more secrets, no more silence. I want children to come here and learn that truth does not need to be hidden." Clara nodded. "Then I will help you." The boy nodded thoughtfully, then ran off to join the others. That evening, Nathan stood on the balcony overlooking the snowy garden. Clara joined him, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "She would be proud," she said softly. Nathan nodded. She already knew what we needed to learn. She knew that kindness is louder than fear. Clara smiled. Then maybe her whisper was never just for you. Maybe it was for everyone who forgot how to listen. By early spring, the first group of children arrived, 6 boys and 4 girls, each carrying their own stories of loss and survival. Nathan greeted them personally at the front door. "This is your home now," he said gently. "Here, no one hides the truth." The children looked around in wonder at the grand hall filled with sunlight. One small boy asked, "Why is it called the Whisper House?" Nathan smiled. "Because sometimes the smallest voices can say the biggest things." The boy nodded thoughtfully, then ran off to join the others. That evening, Nathan stood on the balcony overlooking the snowy garden. Clara joined him, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "She would be proud," she said softly. Nathan nodded. She already knew what we needed to learn. She knew that kindness is louder than fear. Clara smiled. Then maybe her whisper was never just for you. Maybe it was for everyone who forgot how to listen. Nathan looked out at the horizon where the last traces of snow glowed gold under the setting Sunday. For the first time in a long while, he felt a peace that did not come from forgetting, but from understanding. Later that night, he lit the lantern again. Its flame danced against the glass, casting warm reflections on the walls. He whispered, "You were right, Ava. The light should never be hidden." The wind outside stirred softly, as if answering him. The flame steadied, burning bright and strong. The mansion, once a place of secrets, had become a refuge of truth. And within its walls, the whisper of one small girl continued to guide everyone who entered, teaching them that even the quietest voices can rebuild a world when spoken with courage. Spring arrived quietly at the mansion. The snow melted into the earth, and the garden that had once been lifeless began to breathe again. Green leaves unfurled along the fences, and wildflowers pushed through the soil near the stone paths. The air carried the scent of renewal. Nathan Pierce stood on the balcony of what was once his private study. Below him, laughter drifted up from the courtyard. The first group of children at the Whisper House were outside, chasing each other through the garden, their joy echoing across the open space. It was the sound of something pure innocence returning to a place that had once known only silence. Clara Ross joined him, holding a clipboard filled with notes. "The new wing will be ready next week," she said, smiling. "The art room is already finished. They painted the walls themselves." Nathan nodded, his eyes on the children below. "Good. I want this place to be theirs. Every part of it." Clara followed his gaze. "You have changed, Nathan. You used to live for control. Now you live for trust." Nathan smiled faintly. "A child taught me that trust is stronger than fear." He turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever think about her?" Clara nodded. "Every day, but not with sadness anymore. I think about how her courage grew out of nothing and changed everything around her." Nathan's gaze softened. "She would have loved this. The laughter, the light. She would have found a way to make everyone feel safe. That afternoon, Nathan walked through the newly restored rooms of the Whisper House. The hallways were filled with sunlight, the doors painted in soft colors chosen by the children themselves. Each room had a window that opened wide to the garden, and every door had a small quote engraved above it, words that spoke of truth, kindness, and courage. On one door, in small letters, were the words, "Even whispers can move walls." He paused there for a moment, running his fingers over the engraving. The words felt like Ava's voice, quiet but unstoppable. As the day went on, Nathan helped one of the boys, a shy child named Elijah, build a small birdhouse near the garden. Elijah rarely spoke, but he watched Nathan closely, mimicking every motion with careful precision. "You do not have to rush," Nathan said gently. "Take your time. The small details matter most." Elijah nodded, concentrating. When they finished, the boy looked up and smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "Do you think the birds will come?" he asked. "They always come to places where they are safe," Nathan replied. "You just have to wait." That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Nathan sat in his office reviewing letters from donors and local volunteers. The foundation had begun to grow faster than he expected. People wanted to be part of something honest, something healing. But amidst all the progress, Nathan's eyes kept returning to the lantern on the mantel, the one Ava had left behind. It still burned every night, though he replaced the oil carefully to keep it alive. Clara knocked softly before entering. "You are still working," she said, her tone gentle but knowing. "I was just finishing up," he said. "There is always one more thing to fix." Clara sat across from him. "You are trying to fix the world through these children, Nathan, but you also need to fix yourself." He looked at her, caught off guard. "And how do I do that?" "By forgiving," Clara said. "Not just Elise, but yourself. You did not cause the darkness in this house, but you carried it for too long. It is time to set it down." Nathan leaned back in his chair, staring at the flickering lantern. "I want to believe I have. But sometimes when I walk through the halls, I still feel the weight of what happened here." Clara smiled gently. "That is because healing is not the same as forgetting. It is remembering without being afraid." Her words settled over him like the warmth of the fire. He nodded slowly. "You are right. She wanted me to stop being afraid of the dark. Maybe that is what this all means." Later that night, the wind carried the faint sound of rain. Nathan walked through the house one last time before bed. The lights in the hallways glowed softly, illuminating the framed photographs on the walls, pictures of the children smiling, painting, and reading. Each photo was a new memory, layered over the old ones. When he reached the staircase, he stopped. On the step where Ava had once sat and whispered her warning, something small caught the light. It was a single white feather, delicate and clean, resting against the wood. He picked it up and held it carefully. The air felt still, almost sacred. He whispered softly, "You are still here, aren't you?" There was no answer, only the sound of the rain beginning to fall outside, gentle and rhythmic. But the silence that followed was not empty. It was peaceful, filled with presence. He carried the feather to his study and placed it beside the lantern. The flame flickered once, then steadied, as if acknowledging what had been added. Nathan smiled quietly. The next morning, when the children gathered in the main hall, Elijah pointed to the birdhouse they had built. 2 small sparrows fluttered inside it, chirping softly. Nathan watched from the window, his heart lifting. The boy turned to him and said proudly, "They came." Nathan smiled. "Yes, Elijah, they came because the light was here." And in that moment, he finally understood light did not erase the past. It simply gave it a place to rest. The mansion that had once been built on silence now stood as a home of whispers, laughter, and truth. Ava's light had never left. It had only changed form, living now in every act of kindness, every open door, every small voice that dared to be heard. The days in the Whisper House began to follow a rhythm, soft mornings filled with laughter, quiet afternoons of study, and peaceful evenings where stories replaced fear. For the first time in many years, Nathan Pierce felt that every breath he took inside those walls was not heavy, but whole. The house that once concealed secrets now carried voices that dared to be heard. Spring turned warmer, the garden bloomed in full color, and the scent of wild jasmine spread through the open windows. Each morning, Nathan joined the children for breakfast, a ritual that had grown into a small celebration of togetherness. The long dining table, once cold and unused, now overflowed with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of spoons. One morning, Elijah approached Nathan with a notebook in his hands. His eyes, once shy, now sparkled with excitement. "Mr. Pierce," he said softly, "I wrote something. I want you to read it." Nathan smiled. "Of course," he said. He opened the notebook and saw a short story written in careful, uneven handwriting. It was about a little bird that got trapped inside a dark attic but learned to sing until someone came and opened the window. At the end, Elijah had written, "Sometimes we sing not to be heard, but to remind ourselves that we are still alive." Nathan looked up, deeply moved. "That is beautiful," he said. "What made you write this?" Elijah shrugged, his voice small but certain. "Because I think the house used to be like that bird. But now the window is open." "Oh," Nathan smiled, though his throat tightened with emotion. "Yes," he said softly. "It is open now." That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Clara joined Nathan in the courtyard. The stars stretched wide above them, and the night air carried the faint hum of crickets. She handed him a folder filled with the latest registration forms. "We are almost at capacity," she said. "In a few weeks, every room will be full." Nathan nodded slowly. "Then we will build more rooms," he said. "We will make space for anyone who needs it." Clara smiled. "You really meant it when you said no door here will ever close again." "I did," Nathan said. "Ava taught me that closed doors never protect, they only hide." They sat in silence for a moment. The fountain in the courtyard trickled softly, its sound blending with the night wind. Finally, Clara said, "I have been thinking about something. Maybe we should start a program, one that helps children tell their stories, through writing or art. It could help them heal, the way Elijah is learning to." Nathan's eyes brightened. "Yes," he said. "We could call it the Light Project." "The Light Project," Clara repeated with a smile. "Perfect." The next morning, Nathan began setting up a small studio near the east wing. He brought in canvases, brushes, notebooks, and instruments. The children gathered curiously around him. "What is all this?" one of the girls asked. "This," Nathan said with a grin, "is your chance to create something true. You can paint, write, sing, build whatever helps you tell your story. Because here, truth is not something we fear. It is something we share." At first, the children were hesitant. But soon, the room filled with color and sound. Paint streaked across canvases, pencils scratched across paper, and laughter replaced hesitation. Nathan watched from the doorway, his chest filled with quiet pride. In the following weeks, the Light Project grew. Local artists and teachers began to visit, volunteering their time. Clara organized a small exhibition where the children could display their creations. When the day came, the mansion glowed with life. Parents, neighbors, and donors filled the halls. Each wall displayed drawings, photographs, and poems, all carrying pieces of hope that had once been buried under silence. At the center of the exhibit was a simple wooden frame holding one of Ava's original notes, the one that read, "Do not be afraid of the dark anymore. The truth is safe now." Beneath it, Elijah had placed a card that said, "Dedicated to the girl who opened the door for all of us." When Nathan saw it, his eyes filled with tears. He looked across the room at the children, laughing and running between displays. The sound of their joy echoed against the high ceilings, filling the house with something that felt like music. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Nathan stood alone in the hall. The lantern still burned on the mantel, steady and bright. He walked toward it, his footsteps soft against the polished floor. "We did it," he whispered. "You showed us the way." The flame flickered once, as if answering him. Clara appeared at the top of the staircase. "Nathan," she said softly, "there is one more thing." She handed him an envelope addressed to Mr. Nathan Pierce. The handwriting was small but elegant. "It came this afternoon. No return address." Nathan opened it carefully. Inside was a folded letter and a single pressed daisy. The letter read, "Dear Nathan, I am safe. You were right, the truth does not destroy. It saves. The world still has dark corners, but I have learned that even a whisper can reach far when spoken with love. Keep the light burning. Some of us still need to find our way to it. A. Asterisk. Nathan read it twice before he could breathe again. His hand trembled slightly as he placed the daisy beside the lantern. Clara smiled quietly, understanding without words. That night, Nathan wrote a note of his own and tucked it beneath the lantern's base. It read, "The door will never close again. Thank you for showing us how to keep it open." The Whisper House slept peacefully under the stars. The wind carried the faint scent of jasmine and something else, something like memory. Inside, the light burned steady, watched over by the silent promise of a man and the whisper of a child who had changed everything. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Whisper House, painting the wooden floors in gold. The house was awake early that day. Children's voices carried through the halls as laughter mixed with the sound of footsteps running toward breakfast. The smell of pancakes and cinnamon filled the air. It was the kind of morning Nathan Pierce had once thought he would never experience again. He stood by the kitchen doorway, watching as Clara moved between the tables, helping the younger children with their plates. She looked up at him and smiled. "They are getting louder every day," she said with mock exasperation. "That is what houses filled with life are supposed to sound like," Nathan replied, smiling softly. When the children finished breakfast, he led them to the courtyard. Spring had turned the garden into a sea of color. The tulips were in bloom, and the trees were alive with birdsong. Nathan clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "Today," he said, "we are planting something special." Elijah stepped forward, curiosity bright in his eyes. "What are we planting, Mr. Pierce?" Nathan lifted a small sapling from the soil beside him. "This is a magnolia tree," he said. "It will grow tall and strong if we take care of it. We are planting it for someone who once showed us how to be brave." The children watched in silence as he knelt, hands steady, and began to dig. Each of them took turns adding a handful of soil around the roots. When it was done, Clara placed a small wooden marker beside it. Carved into the wood were 4 words, "For the girl who whispered." The children stood around the tree for a long moment, their faces calm, their small fingers brushing against the new leaves. "Will it bloom soon?" one of the younger girls asked. Nathan smiled. "Not yet," he said gently, "but one day, when the time is right, it will fill this garden with white flowers, and every time you see them, I want you to remember that courage often starts as a whisper." The children nodded, and Elijah reached out to tie a small ribbon around the trunk, a piece of yellow fabric from his art project. The wind caught it, making it dance lightly. That evening, after the children had gone inside, Nathan and Clara stayed in the courtyard. The sun dipped low, bathing the magnolia in orange light. Clara broke the silence first. "Do you ever think about seeing her again?" Nathan's eyes were fixed on the tree. "Every day," he said softly, "but I do not think she was meant to stay. Some people come into your life only long enough to change its direction." Clara nodded. "Then maybe she is out there helping someone else find their way." Nathan smiled faintly. "I hope so." They sat quietly for a while, listening to the sound of the children laughing inside. The house glowed from within, its windows warm and alive. The faint hum of music drifted from the piano room, played by one of the older girls learning her first song. The melody was clumsy but sincere. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, Nathan walked alone through the halls. He stopped by the lantern on the mantel, its steady flame flickering against the glass. The pressed daisy Ava had sent still rested beside it, now slightly faded but no less beautiful. He picked up the lantern and carried it outside to the garden. The night was cool, and the air smelled of earth and rain. He placed the lantern at the base of the magnolia tree, its golden light spilling softly across the soil. "This light belongs here now," he whispered. "You would have wanted that." The wind moved gently through the branches, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. Nathan stood for a while. The lantern's glow reflected in his eyes. He felt no sadness, only peace. Inside the house, Clara noticed him through the window and quietly stepped outside. "You are moving the lantern," she said softly. Nathan nodded. "It is time," he said. "This light is no longer for me. It is for them, the children, the house, the truth she helped us find." Clara smiled. "Then we will keep it burning." The next morning, the children gathered around the tree again. The lantern still glowed faintly, even though the sun had risen. They watched it with quiet fascination. Elijah turned to Nathan and said, "It looks like it does not want to go out." Nathan placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "That is because some lights never do." As days passed, the magnolia tree began to take root. Its small leaves reached higher with each sunrise, and the children took turns watering it. The yellow ribbon fluttered constantly in the breeze, bright against the green. Visitors began to arrive more often, teachers, volunteers, and parents curious about the Whisper House. They marveled at the change, at how warmth seemed to radiate from the very walls. Nathan often heard them whisper, "This place feels different," and he would answer quietly, "It is, because it was built on truth." One afternoon, when the last visitors had left, Nathan found Elijah sitting under the magnolia tree, his notebook open. "What are you writing today?" Nathan asked. The boy smiled. "I am writing about the light," he said. "The one that never goes out." Nathan nodded, his voice quiet but sure. "That is a story worth keeping." As the sun set, casting a golden glow across the garden, the magnolia tree swayed gently. The lantern flickered beside it, its flame steady and warm. Nathan stood watching, knowing deep inside that the story was no longer just his, it belonged to all who had found courage in the whispers of truth. And as the wind moved through the branches, it almost sounded like a voice, soft and familiar, whispering again from somewhere unseen, "Do not be afraid of the dark anymore." Nathan smiled, and for the first time, he did not answer. The light in the garden said everything that needed to be said. Summer arrived with long days and bright skies. The Whisper House stood proudly on the hill, surrounded by a sea of blooming magnolia flowers. The tree in the courtyard had grown stronger, its branches already stretching wide enough to shade the children when they played. The yellow ribbon Elijah had tied months ago still fluttered at its center, glowing gold under the sunlight. Each morning began the same way. The sound of laughter filled the garden as children ran barefoot through the grass, their joy echoing against the stone walls. Nathan Pierce often watched them from the porch, a cup of coffee in his hand, feeling a kind of peace he had never known before. Inside, Clara Ross managed the daily activities, her calm voice guiding the children through art, writing, and reading. The Light Project had become the heart of the Whisper House. Each child had their own story to tell, and Nathan made sure they all had a place to tell it. One morning, a letter arrived addressed to Nathan. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat but delicate. He opened it slowly. Inside was a short note from the local newspaper. They wanted to feature the Whisper House in a special column titled, "Places That Heal." The letter ended with a simple question. "Would you allow us to tell your story?" Nathan read it twice before setting it down. Clara entered just then, carrying a box of books. "You look like you are thinking about something," she said with a smile. "I just received a letter," Nathan replied, handing it to her. "They want to write about us." Clara read it quickly, then looked up. "You should say yes," she said. "People need to know what this place has become." Nathan hesitated. "This house has seen so much pain. I do not want to turn it into a headline." Clara shook her head gently. "You are not showing them the pain. You are showing them what grew from it." That evening, Nathan sat by the magnolia tree and thought about what Clara had said. The children played nearby, their laughter mixing with the sound of the wind through the leaves. He looked at the lantern resting at the tree's base, its glass glowing faintly even before dusk. The flame had never gone out, not once, since he placed it there. Finally, he made his decision. The next morning, he called the reporter and agreed to the interview. A week later, a woman named Grace Dawson arrived at the Whisper House. She was gentle in her approach, taking notes as she walked through the rooms. She asked about the programs, the children, and how it all began. Nathan answered carefully, but truthfully. When they reached the courtyard, Grace stopped to admire the magnolia tree. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "And that lantern, it feels like a symbol of something." Nathan nodded. "It is," he said. "It was once a light of warning, but now it is a light of hope. A child left it for us, a girl who saw what none of us were willing to see." Grace looked at him curiously. "Would you like to tell me about her?" Nathan paused, his gaze falling on the yellow ribbon swaying in the breeze. "Her name was Ava," he said finally. "She came into my life when I was blind to the truth. She whispered what no one else dared to say, and because of her, the truth was revealed. She disappeared after that, but she never really left. Grace listened silently, her pen still. "That sounds like a story people need to hear," she said quietly. A few days later, the article was published. It was titled, "The House That Listened." The story described the Whisper House, not as a place of tragedy, but as a living symbol of redemption. It spoke of a man who rebuilt his home into a refuge for those who had been silenced. It ended with a single line: "The flame still burns, because a whisper once taught it to." The article spread quickly. Letters began arriving from across the country, people who wanted to volunteer, donate, or simply thank them for the work they were doing. Some wrote about their own stories of survival, others about children who reminded them of Ava. Nathan read every letter carefully. One night, as he sat in his office surrounded by envelopes, he found one that made his heart stop. It had no return address, but inside was a small piece of folded paper and a photograph. The photograph showed the magnolia tree, taken from a distance, with the lantern glowing beneath it. In the corner of the photo, someone had written, "She would be proud." The paper inside carried only a few words. "The light reached me too." Nathan stared at it for a long time. The handwriting was different now, older, steadier, but something about it felt familiar. He looked toward the window, where the magnolia swayed gently under the moonlight, and he smiled. He placed the letter beside Ava's first note on his desk. Together, they told a story that had no end. Later that week, Nathan gathered the children under the magnolia tree. "I want to tell you something important," he said. The children quieted, their faces curious. "This house was built from truth. And truth," he said slowly, "is like a light. Once you share it, it keeps growing. One day, each of you will take your light into the world. That is how you keep this place alive." "Do we?" Elijah raised his hand. "What if people do not listen?" Nathan smiled. "Then you whisper again, and keep whispering until they do." The children nodded solemnly, understanding in their own way. That night, the lantern's flame burned brighter than usual, casting golden patterns across the garden. Nathan stood beside the magnolia tree, the summer air warm around him. For the first time, he no longer looked for Ava in the distance. He could feel her here in the laughter of the children, in the light of the lantern, in the truth that refused to die. The Whisper House had become what she had dreamed of, a place where silence ended and courage began. And somewhere beyond the hills, perhaps, another whisper was already beginning. Autumn returned quietly, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and rain-soaked earth. The Whisper House stood strong against the soft chill of the season, its windows glowing warmly against the gray sky. The magnolia tree had grown tall now, its branches steady even as the wind pressed through them. The yellow ribbon that Elijah had tied months ago still fluttered, a small flash of color against the fading world. Inside the house, everything moved with the same gentle rhythm it had learned to keep. Mornings began with laughter in the dining hall, afternoons filled with lessons and art, and evenings ended with stories told beneath the lantern light. Nathan Pierce had come to love these hours, most the quiet that followed joy, the peace that came after truth. One Friday morning, as the children worked on their writing projects, Clara entered Nathan's office holding a letter. "It came for you," she said, handing it over. The envelope was simple, but something about it felt different. The handwriting on the front was neat, almost formal, but written in ink that seemed too careful, as though every stroke had been chosen with purpose. Nathan opened it slowly. Inside was a note from a nearby youth organization inviting him to speak at a conference titled, "Voices That Change the World." The letter read, "Your story and the story of the Whisper House has inspired many. We would be honored if you could share it with others." Clara smiled when she read it over his shoulder. "You should go," she said. "You have something important to say." Nathan nodded but remained quiet for a moment. "It has always been her story," he said softly. "The girl who whispered. I only followed where she led." "That is exactly why you should tell it," Clara replied. A week later, Nathan found himself standing on a small stage at a community center filled with students, teachers, and parents. The lights were soft, the air calm. He adjusted the microphone, looked out at the crowd, and began to speak. "When I first built my house," he said, "I thought success would fill it. I thought wealth and order would make it safe. But one day, a small voice barely louder than a whisper told me something I did not want to hear. It told me the truth." He paused, letting the words sink in. That truth was hard, but it saved lives. It taught me that silence is not safety, and that kindness can be louder than power. He told them about Ava, about the courage of a child who had seen what adults refused to see. He spoke of the night she disappeared, the note she left behind, and how her whisper had built something greater than fear. When he finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, then filled with the sound of applause. Nathan felt something shift in him, not pride, but release. The story had left him now. It belonged to everyone who needed to hear it. After the event, a young girl approached him. She was no older than 10, her hair braided neatly, her eyes bright but shy. "Mr. Pierce," she said softly, "my mom brought me here tonight. She says your story helped her, but I think it helped me too." Nathan crouched to meet her gaze. "How so?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Because sometimes I see things that scare me, and no one listens. But now I know I can keep whispering until someone does." Nathan felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same ache Ava's words once stirred in him. He smiled warmly. "That is exactly right," he said. "Do not stop whispering. Truth needs voices like yours." When he returned to the Whisper House that evening, the sky was painted in deep shades of orange and blue. The children were gathered around the magnolia tree, listening as Clara read them a story. The lantern at the tree's base glowed faintly in the dusk. Nathan stood for a moment, simply watching, feeling that same sense of quiet strength Ava had once brought into his life. Later that night, as the children slept, Nathan sat by the window in his office, rereading the note that Ava had sent so long ago. "Do not be afraid of the dark anymore. The truth is safe now," he whispered into the stillness. "The truth is not only safe, Ava. It is growing." The next morning, the garden was covered in a fine mist. Dew clung to the petals of the magnolia leaves, and the lantern's flame flickered gently inside its glass. Nathan found Elijah there, sitting cross-legged near the base of the tree, sketching something in his notebook. "What are you drawing today?" Nathan asked. Elijah looked up, smiling. "The magnolia," he said, "but not how it looks right now. I am drawing how I think it will look when I grow up." Nathan crouched beside him. The drawing showed the magnolia large and radiant, its branches wide enough to shelter dozens of children playing beneath it. The lantern still sat at its roots, glowing brighter than ever. "It is perfect," Nathan said softly. Elijah grinned. "Then I will keep drawing it until it looks real." Nathan nodded, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "That is what we all do here," he said. "We take what we imagine, and we make it real." As the day went on, Nathan felt a calm certainty settle in his chest. The Whisper House had become more than a home. It was a living legacy, a promise that truth, once spoken, could never truly fade. That evening, as he stood in the courtyard under the first stars of autumn, he saw the lantern's light shimmer across the magnolia leaves. The flame burned steady, untouched by the wind, and in that moment, Nathan understood something new. Ava's whisper had never been meant to stop. It had only changed voices. The children now carried it forward, each one a keeper of the light she had left behind. And as long as they spoke with courage, the world would keep listening. The days grew shorter as autumn deepened, and the Whisper House glowed warmer than ever. Each evening, the sound of laughter mixed with the wind that rustled through the magnolia tree. The yellow ribbon still danced at its center, though its color had softened from months of sun and rain. Nathan Pierce often found himself pausing beneath that tree, listening not for voices, but for the stillness that followed them. By then, the Whisper House had become a place known far beyond the small town. Families visited, teachers volunteered, and letters kept arriving from people who had read about it. Every story carried a thread of hope, and Nathan made sure each child understood that hope was something they were allowed to hold on to. One morning, as golden leaves carpeted the garden, Clara walked into Nathan's study carrying a thin folder. "You might want to see this," she said, setting it gently on his desk. Inside was a letter from a nearby university. They wanted to partner with the Whisper House to create a scholarship program for children who had grown up there. The program would fund their education and provide mentorship to help them carry what they had learned into the world. Nathan read the letter twice, his voice quiet when he finally spoke. "They want to give them wings," he said. Clara smiled. Yes, and you gave them roots. It is the perfect balance. He leaned back in his chair, emotion tightening his chest. Do you ever think about how far we have come? Clara nodded. Every day. But I think the truth is, we are still walking where she led us. Nathan knew she meant Ava. Her name no longer brought sorrow, only gratitude. Yes, he said softly, we are. That afternoon, Nathan gathered the children in the courtyard. The magnolia tree shimmered under the pale sun, its leaves rustling like quiet applause. I have something to tell you, he said, his voice strong but kind. A university wants to help us start a scholarship program. It means that when you grow up, you can study anywhere you want. The world will be open to you. A cheer rose from the group. The older children looked at each other with wide eyes, while the younger ones clapped without fully understanding. Elijah, standing near the front, raised his hand. Does that mean we have to leave someday? Nathan smiled gently. It means you will have a choice. You can leave to see the world, or stay and help it grow. Either way, this will always be your home. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. Then I will come back. When I am older, I will teach the next children about the light. Nathan felt his throat tighten. I know you will, he said softly. Later that night, Nathan sat alone in his study. The fire burned low, and the lantern by the magnolia tree glowed faintly through the window. He opened his journal and began to write something he had not done in months. He wrote about the house, the children, and the seasons that had changed both him and them. He wrote about Ava, the girl who had whispered truth into the heart of fear, and about the way her light had outlived her presence. He wrote, every story begins with a whisper. Sometimes, it is the voice of a child who sees the truth we ignore. Sometimes, it is the sound of courage breaking silence. The whisper becomes an echo, and the echo becomes a home. This is what the Whisper House has become, a home for echoes of kindness. As he finished, Clara knocked softly on the door. The children are asking if you will read them a story before bed, she said with a smile. Nathan closed his journal. Of course, he said, rising to his feet. In the main hall, the children were already gathered in a circle, their faces glowing in the lantern light. Elijah held a small book in his hands, the story he had written about the bird that learned to sing in the dark. Can I read mine tonight? He asked. Nathan nodded, his heart full. You should. Elijah began to read, his voice clear and steady. The children listened intently, and when he reached the final line, the bird sang not because it was safe, but because its song could guide others home. A gentle hush filled the room. Nathan looked around at their faces, and something deep inside him settled. The light that Ava had kindled now burned in every one of them. When the children went to bed, Nathan walked out into the garden. The air was cool, and the stars stretched endlessly above. The magnolia tree stood tall, its leaves whispering softly in the wind. The lantern at its base glowed brighter than usual, almost golden. Clara joined him a moment later, her voice low. Do you ever wonder if she knows? Nathan smiled faintly. I think she does. I think she has known all along. The two of them stood in silence, watching as the lantern flickered. The light reflected in their eyes, steady and calm. Nathan whispered, You were right, Ava. The truth is safe now, and it is growing. As the wind shifted, the magnolia branches swayed gently, and for a moment, a single petal fell, landing softly near the lantern's flame. The light shimmered once, then steadied again, unfaltering. Nathan took a deep breath. Tomorrow, he said quietly, I will tell them about the scholarship, and maybe one day, one of them will find her. Clara smiled. Maybe she will find them first. The two of them stood beneath the magnolia tree until the night folded into stillness. Around them, the Whisper House slept peacefully, its heart glowing in the courtyard, a promise that the light would never fade and the whispers would never die. Winter returned, soft and quiet. The first snow drifted over the hills, covering the garden in white. The Whisper House stood still beneath the falling flakes, its windows glowing warmly in the early dusk. Inside, the laughter of children mixed with the crackle of the fireplace, the sound of pages turning, and the steady hum of life. Nathan Pierce stood by the window of his study, watching the magnolia tree outside. Even bare, it looked alive, its branches reaching upward as if holding invisible light. The lantern at its base burned as it always had, unwavering against the cold wind. He walked to his desk and opened his journal one last time. His handwriting had grown slower over the years, but his thoughts had never been clearer. He wrote, "Truth begins as a whisper, but when it is spoken with love, it becomes a light that never goes out. I once thought a child's voice was small, but I have learned that courage does not depend on size. It depends on heart." He closed the book gently and looked around the room. The walls were lined with photographs, children smiling, holding diplomas, painting murals, planting flowers. Some had grown and returned as adults, bringing their own children to visit. Each one carried a part of Ava's light within them. Clara entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. Her hair had turned silver, but her smile was the same. "They are waiting for you," she said softly. Nathan smiled. "It is time?" She nodded. "It is time." In the great hall, the children knew faces, new voices were gathered in a circle beneath a garland of winter lights. The oldest boy held the lantern, the same one that had burned since the night Ava left it behind. Nathan stepped forward slowly, the children's eyes following him with quiet admiration. He spoke with the calm strength that came only from peace. "Many years ago, a little girl stood in this house and whispered something brave. She taught me that truth does not need to shout to be heard. It only needs someone willing to listen." Oh, the room was silent except for the faint sound of the wind against the windows. Nathan looked at the flame flickering in the lantern. "This light has burned through every season. It belongs to all of you now. Keep it alive not just here, but wherever you go. Let it remind you that no kindness is ever too small, and no truth is ever too quiet." He placed his hand gently on the lantern. The boy holding it smiled, his eyes shining with reflection and hope. Nathan stepped back, and for the first time, he felt that the Whisper House no longer needed him. It belonged entirely to the voices it sheltered. Outside, snow continued to fall over the magnolia tree, blanketing the garden in soft white light. The lantern's glow reflected off the snow, a golden warmth against the cold. And somewhere beyond the hush of the evening, as if carried by the wind itself, came a faint, familiar voice, gentle and sure. "You kept the door open." Nathan smiled, tears soft in his eyes. "Always," he whispered. The Whisper House stood quietly beneath the winter sky, the light still burning, the promise still alive. And though the world outside kept changing, the truth remained born from a whisper, carried by love, and alive forever.